The first time Mr. Carter noticed the girl in the back row, she was staring out the window as if the world beyond the glass was speaking a language only she could understand. Her name was Emma Hayes, 11 years old, newly transferred from a school across the state. She had arrived 2 weeks into the semester, wearing a faded gray hoodie 2 sizes too big, a backpack with 1 broken strap, and shoes that looked like they'd survived more than 1 winter storm. She didn't speak. Not once. When Mr. Carter called her name during roll, she didn't raise her hand or make a sound, just nodded slightly. Other teachers, he later learned, had already labeled her quiet, withdrawn, possibly mute. But Mr. Carter had seen quiet. Emma was something else. She was controlled. She sat perfectly still in her chair, always at the edge of the group, always watching. Her eyes scanned the room constantly, not nervously, but methodically. She noticed everything. When someone whispered behind her, her eyes flicked. When someone dropped a book, she flinched. When someone laughed too loudly, her hand tightened around her pencil. He started paying closer attention. During reading time, the class was supposed to read silently. Mr. Carter walked between desks, pretending to check in, but really observing. Emma. Her book was open, eyes focused, but not on the words. She was watching the shadow move across the floor as the sun shifted through the window blinds. Not distracted, just detached. At lunch, he noticed she always sat alone, picking at her food but barely eating. Other kids gave her a wide berth. One day, when a boy named Tyler spilled juice on her backpack and muttered an awkward, "Sorry," she didn't even look at him. But her shoulders stiffened and her fingers curled into fists for half a second. It was the only reaction she gave. Afternoon, Mr. Carter asked the school counselor about her. Emma Hayes? Ms. Lane opened a slim file and sighed. Transferred from Whitmore Elementary. No IEPs, no therapy records. Her parents marked her as shy. Apparently, she stopped speaking 2 years ago, after what the father called a family incident. What kind of incident? They didn't say, and no one followed up. Her records are incomplete, and honestly, we're understaffed. Unless there's bruises or blood, no one's pressing. Mr. Carter frowned. But you've seen her in the hallways, right? You think she's actually mute? Miss Lane hesitated. I think she's terrified of something. And when kids are that scared, they shut down. The next morning, Mr. Carter tried something different. He left a small note on her desk before class started. Would you rather write than speak? She read it, then looked at him directly for the first time. Not long, just a flicker of eye contact. But it was enough. She picked up her pen and scribbled back. Writing is safer. 4 words. But they hit him like thunder. She could talk. She just wouldn't. Or rather, she couldn't afford to. Over the next week, Mr. Carter started leaving. Small questions on her desk every other morning, tucked under her textbook like a secret. Do you like books? Yes, especially ones where quiet people survive. Favorite animal? Cats. They hide well. Are you okay? A pause. Then finally, I'm surviving. She always responded in writing. Never in front of others. Always discreet. But the more she wrote, the more he noticed something unusual in her words. Precision. Her language was thoughtful, her vocabulary advanced, her handwriting tight and disciplined. This was a smart kid. A deep thinker. A girl used to being misunderstood. One rainy afternoon, when the other kids were rowdy and distracted, he assigned a writing prompt. Describe a place where you feel safe. Most students wrote about bedrooms, parks, grandparents' houses. Emma turned. In a folded paper, no name on it, but he knew it was hers. It said, a closet with a lock, and silence thick enough to hide inside. Mr. Carter sat with that sentence for a long time. A few days later, he caught a glimpse of her wrist when her sleeve slipped up as she reached for a pencil. A faint bruise. Old but real. Just below her thumb. He didn't say anything, just made a note. When she noticed him looking, she froze. Her eyes locked on his, wide, unblinking. He forced a casual smile and turned away. That night, he stared at his ceiling fan, replaying every detail. Her silence, the bruise, the careful way she monitored the classroom. Not scared like a victim of bullying. Not embarrassed like a shy girl. She was surviving something. He got out of bed, opened his laptop, and looked up her old school. Whitmore Elementary, 3 hours away. Small town. He found an old news article buried deep in local archives. Man hospitalized after falling downstairs. Wife says it was accident. Daughter present, no injuries reported. The man's name? Daniel Hayes. Emma's father. There were no charges. No follow-up. Just silence. The next day, Mr. Carter brought her a book during quiet reading time. The Sound of Silence. A story about a boy in Tokyo learning the difference between noise and peace. Emma didn't react at first. But when she opened the cover, she stopped. Inside was a small sticky note. Sometimes silence isn't peace. Sometimes it's prison. I hear you. She blinked quickly. For the first time, he saw something break in her eyes. Not tears, but a crack. A tiny fracture in the armor. And then she nodded. Barely. But she nodded. Mr. Carter knew from that moment that she was asking for help, just not with words. And he would find a way to listen. By the second week, Mr. Carter had read nearly every piece of paper Emma had handed him. He kept them locked in the bottom drawer of his desk, away from curious eyes, not because they were explosive, but because they were quietly devastating. They weren't confessions. Emma never said anything directly, but every response was like a thread, and Carter was beginning to see the tapestry forming. Writing is safer. The quiet ones don't get hurt as much. Cats hide better than dogs. He started noticing how Emma would scan the room every time someone raised their voice, even if it was just a classmate laughing too loudly. Her shoulders would tense. Her eyes would dart to the door, then to the nearest adult. It was reflexive, automatic. She was always calculating. One afternoon, he gave the class an open-ended journal prompt. What would your perfect day look like? Most kids wrote about amusement parks, endless pizza, video games. Emma's was different. She wrote, the perfect day is when no one comes. Home angry. The walls stay quiet. The keys don't jingle too early. The door doesn't slam. Dinner is just dinner, and I can sleep without keeping one eye open. Mr. Carter read it 3 times. He walked over to her desk and, without drawing attention, left a sticky note in the margin. Thank you for trusting the paper. She didn't look at him, but her hand lingered on the notebook a second longer. Unusual. Later that week, Carter brought it up again with Miss Lane, the school counselor. She's never had a documented diagnosis, he said, but her behavior patterns, they're too precise. It's like she's trained herself to disappear. Miss Lane nodded. I agree. I've tried to get her to come to my office, but she won't engage. I don't want to force it and shut her down further. We need to meet her where she is. He said, she's talking, just not out loud. That weekend, Mr. Carter drove 3 hours to Whitmore, the town Emma had transferred from. He didn't have a formal reason to go. He told himself he was just curious. But the truth was, he needed answers. Whitmore was small, the kind of place where nothing stayed secret for long. He stopped at a diner near the center of town and casually asked the waitress if she knew the Hayes family. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Daniel and Sarah? Yeah, they left a while ago. Rumors said they had trouble at home. Cops showed up once. No one ever said what happened. Mr. Carter felt his stomach twist. Did they have a daughter? Little girl, yeah, quiet thing, always holding a book. I think she saw something she wasn't supposed to. On Monday, Emma came to class with a different hoodie. Still too big, but newer. Mr. Carter complimented the color, a soft blue. She blinked in surprise, then nodded slowly. He left another note on her desk. Do you feel safer here than before? Her response came after 10 minutes of silence. No one yells here. Then she added, but I still don't sleep. The turning point came when Carter gave an art assignment. Draw a place where you feel strong. The class took it as a fun task. Lots of castles, pirate ships, space stations. Emma handed in a small sheet of paper folded twice over. When he opened it, he saw a black crayon used to shade most of the page. In the center, barely visible in the dark, was a tiny closet door, and behind it, a single white eye peering out. Below it, she'd written, "No one can hit what they can't find." That was the first time Mr. Carter felt true rage, the cold, restrained kind that coils inside you when you know a child is being hurt, and you don't yet have the power to stop it. The next day, as the students filed out for lunch, Emma lingered. She waited until the classroom was nearly empty, then walked to his desk. She didn't speak, didn't even write. She just reached into her sleeve and pulled out a ripped piece of notebook paper, crumpled and slightly torn, and placed it on his desk. Then she walked away. Mr. Carter smoothed it open with shaking fingers. It had only 7 words. If I speak, he'll kill Mom. No name, no context, but enough. He stared at it for a full minute, his pulse pounding. Then he carefully folded the note and placed it in his drawer, next to the others. That afternoon, Carter met privately with Miss Lane. We have to report. It's she said immediately, gripping the paper. I know, he replied, but we can't do it recklessly. If he's really that dangerous, any sudden visit from Child Protective Services might make things worse. We need a plan. And time, he added. We need her trust. That night, Carter sat alone at his kitchen table, the note unfolded. In front of him, if I speak, he'll kill Mom. He couldn't stop thinking about that sentence. Not just the fear in it, but the calculation. Emma didn't just fear for herself. She was protecting someone, which meant she was strong. And if she had that kind of strength, then maybe, just maybe, she could tell her story on her terms. The next morning, he had an idea. A school-wide project. Creative, expressive, safe, he'd call it. The voice you can't hear. The next day, Mr. Carter stood in front of the classroom with his usual calm, but purposeful energy. I want to try something new, he announced, holding up a small white poster board. It's called The Voice You Can't Hear. It's a creative project. Poems, skits, artwork, songs, anything that expresses who you are without needing to speak. A few students groaned. One girl rolled her eyes. But a few, including Emma, looked up with curiosity. This isn't for a grade, he added. But I'd love if some of you chose to present your projects in a few weeks. For those interested, we'll meet during the last half hour on Fridays. Optional, no pressure. He glanced at Emma. She was staring at her desk, but her pencil had stopped moving. On Friday, 4 students stayed behind after class. One was Emma. Mr. Carter smiled gently. Thanks for staying. Let's make this our little group. Our silent voices. He introduced a few warm-up activities. Wordless storytelling with drawings, miming exercises, building a scene using only sound effects. The others laughed and got silly. Emma remained reserved, but observant. When he asked each student to choose a theme for their eventual project, Emma hesitated. Then she wrote 2 words on her notebook and quietly pushed it across. The desk. Trapped rooms. He nodded. That's powerful. She met his eyes. Just briefly. That look again. like a door opening for half a second and closing fast. The next Monday, Mr. Carter requested an official home visit to the Hayes residence. Under the pretense of checking on Emma's academic adjustment, it was granted. But Ms. Lane insisted on joining, and so did the vice principal. They arrived at the Hayes house on a rainy afternoon. It sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, the lawn impeccably trimmed, the hedges neat. Curtains drawn in every window. Too perfect. Daniel Hayes opened the door with a broad smile. Clean-shaven, neatly dressed, not a hair out of place. Mr. Carter, isn't it? Please, come in, he said with warmth that felt just slightly too practiced. Thank you for having us, Miss Lane replied, stepping in. Inside, the house was immaculate. Framed Bible verses on the wall. Family photos, smiling Emma in all of them, but much younger. She didn't look the same. Her eyes were brighter back then. Wider. Open. Emma entered the room silently, hands tucked into her sleeves. Her mother trailed behind her like a shadow, thin, pale, eyes downcast. Emma's been a blessing, Daniel said, his arm around his wife. A little shy, yes, but we believe in discipline and structure. It's helped her adjust. He smiled as if expecting applause. Mr. Carter kept his voice neutral. We've noticed Emma is very creative. She's participating in an art project, quiet expression. It seems to help her. Daniel's smile faded, just slightly. She shouldn't need therapy or excuses. We teach her strength. Ms. Lane said softly, we want to ensure she feels safe, supported. Daniel's eyes darkened for half a second before the smile returned. She's safe here, he said. Always. Mr. Carter glanced at Emma. She hadn't spoken, hadn't moved, but her hand was twitching. Her fingers kept drawing invisible circles on her leg. A tick, a tell, fear. On the drive back, no one spoke for a while. Then Miss Lane said, well? Carter exhaled. He's dangerous. You saw how Emma froze. The mother didn't say a single word. She looked like a hostage, Miss Lane muttered. We need to proceed carefully. If we provoke him, he might take it out on them, she finished. Carter nodded. Let's give Emma a way out, on her terms, through the project. That Friday, during the silent project session, Emma stayed late. When the other students left, she approached Carter's desk and handed him a folded drawing. It showed a room, small, windowless, with a door that had 3 locks on the outside. Inside, a girl curled up in the corner. Outside the door, a dark figure loomed, faceless, massive. Next to the drawing, she had written, what if the monster wears a smile? Mr. Carter looked up at her. His voice caught in his throat, but he forced it steady. I believe you, he said. She looked down. But for the first time, he thought she might believe him too. He began preparing for the presentation day. He contacted Miss Lane, the vice principal, and discreetly, a detective he knew from a community outreach program. He shared the journal entries, the drawing, the note, everything except Emma's name. At first, we need someone there, he said. Someone who can act if the father gives himself away. The detective agreed, quietly. No sirens. No alerts. Just observation. We'll need probable cause to detain him, she warned. We'll be watching. Meanwhile, Emma worked quietly, methodically. On her project, she built a series of shadow puppets. A small girl. A giant looming man. A tiny closet. A flickering candle. She practiced controlling the shadows behind a white screen Mr. Carter helped set up in the library. No one else saw it but him and Miss Lane. She's telling everything, Lane whispered, watching Emma rehearse, without ever saying a word. Carter added. The night before the big presentation, Carter stayed late at school, checking lights and cables. He found a note taped to his desk. It wasn't signed. If he knows I'm telling, he'll stop smiling. Below it, a second line. But I'm ready. He read it twice. Then once more. His hands were shaking. The day of the presentation arrived under a pale, overcast sky. Clouds hung heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Mr. Carter stood in the school auditorium long before anyone arrived. The projector was tested, the lighting was perfect, and a soft white screen stretched across the stage, ready for Emma's shadow story. He'd moved the chairs closer than usual, creating a small, intimate space. He didn't want anyone to miss a single movement. At 5:30 p.m., parents and students began to trickle in. Laughter, small talk, program pamphlets being handed out by eager volunteers. No one had any idea what was coming, except a few. Detective Sandra Price sat quietly in the second row, dressed in a casual sweater and jeans, blending in as if she were just another parent. She gave Mr. Carter a small nod as he passed by. He nodded back, barely able to breathe. At 5:50, Emma arrived. She wore a long dark dress. Her hair was neatly pulled back, her eyes wide but focused. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a small box of supplies. Behind her, Daniel Hayes strode in like a man attending a business award ceremony, confident, smiling. His hand rested on Emma's shoulder as they moved through the crowd. Mr. Carter forced himself to stay calm. He could see Daniel scanning the room, clocking everyone, measuring, controlling. Emma's mother followed behind, eyes lowered. She sat in the back row, alone. At 6 p.m. sharp, the house lights dimmed. Mr. Carter stepped on stage. Good evening, and welcome to our special night. The voice you can't hear, a celebration of expression beyond words. He explained how students had used art, movement, and storytelling to share something deeply personal, and that one performance in particular would close the night. After a few short pieces, a silent dance, a piano solo, a short film, it was time. Stage went dark. A soft light glowed behind the white sheet. Emma appeared, a small figure behind the screen. Her silhouette cast in perfect form. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She raised her hands. The story began. A small shadow of a girl emerged on the screen, drawn in simple shapes. She moved from place to place. A school, a bedroom, a hallway. Then, the giant shadow appeared, larger than life, misshapen, a father, but not quite. His arms were too long. His mouth never closed. His face was blank. He stood in doorways. He locked doors. He stood too close. The small girl shrank, more and more with each scene. At one point, the shadow father placed a hand on the girl's head. She crumpled like paper. The audience gasped. Mr. Carter looked at Daniel Hayes. He was frozen, arms crossed, face blank. Emma continued. The small girl built something. A paper house. She placed it over her head. But the monster stood outside, pounding on the walls. The house cracked. Then came a moment no one expected. The girl on the screen, Emma's puppet, stood up. She opened the door. Light poured in. The monster screamed. Silent, but clear, and vanished. When the performance ended, the auditorium was completely still. You could hear a pin drop. Then the applause came. Hesitant at first, then growing. Some people stood. A few wiped tears. But Emma didn't bow. She didn't wait for recognition. She simply stepped out from behind the screen and stood at the edge of the stage, facing the crowd. Then she did something she had never done at school. She opened her mouth, and she spoke. "My name is Emma," she said, her voice soft and trembling. "And I'm not mute. I never was." A stunned silence filled the room. She looked directly at her father. "I just couldn't talk." "Not around you." Daniel's face didn't move, but something in his eyes shifted. Cracked. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded paper, her final drawing, and dropped it on the stage floor. She turned and walked off stage. Detective Price stood before Daniel Hayes could react. Daniel Hayes, she said calmly, flashing her badge. We need to speak with you. Please come with me. What the hell is this? He snapped, rising to his feet. Several audience members turned, murmuring. I said we're going to speak outside, the detective repeated. Now, Daniel's jaw clenched. He looked at Emma's mother, who still sat quietly, eyes on the floor. Then at Emma, now standing beside Mr. Carter in the wings, no longer trembling. You people are unbelievable, he spat. But he followed. Outside, more officers waited. They didn't need to cuff him. They didn't have to. He was already caught. Witness statements, Emma's notes, the drawing, the performance. The patterns were unmistakable, and this time Emma had used her voice, with or without words. Back inside, the auditorium was slowly clearing. Emma sat on the edge of the stage, staring at her hands. Mr. Carter joined her, quietly. After a long pause, he asked, How do you feel? She didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, Like I've been underwater, and I just took my first breath. He smiled. You were brilliant, Emma. She shook her head. I was scared. But you did it anyway, he said. That's what makes it brave. The next morning, the entire school buzzed with quiet disbelief. Some students whispered in the hallways. Others avoided looking at Emma when she passed. A few stared, wide-eyed, unsure of what to say. She had gone from the silent girl no one noticed to the girl who stunned an entire auditorium with a shadow play. And a voice. Emma, for the first time in years, walked the halls with her head held just a little higher. Not because she enjoyed the attention, she hated it, but because she no longer carried the unbearable weight of a secret. She could breathe now. After second period, Mr. Carter found her sitting alone on a bench outside the art room. The morning sun filtered through the trees, scattering patterns of light across her notebook. He sat beside her, silent for a moment. I brought something for you, he said, handing her a small envelope. Inside was a letter. It was official. From Child Protective Services. Emma opened it carefully, scanning the words, her breath catching as she read. Her father had been formally charged with emotional abuse, endangerment of a minor, and obstruction of justice. He would remain in custody, awaiting trial. Her mother, though not charged, had agreed to temporarily relinquish custody while the investigation unfolded. Emma would be placed with a temporary foster family, chosen specifically for trauma-sensitive care. Emma stared at the letter, her hands trembling slightly. I thought, maybe no one would believe me. Mr. Carter shook his head. They did. You made sure they did. Her foster home was just a 15-minute drive from school, a quiet house on a tree-lined street with a garden full of sunflowers, and a dog named Rufus that barked like a lion but cuddled like a teddy bear. The family was kind, calm, and didn't ask too many questions. The foster mother, Miriam, was a retired teacher who made fresh soup every evening and never raised her voice. For the first time in her life, Emma had a room with a door that locked from the inside. At school, things slowly shifted. Emma didn't become popular, and she didn't want to, but people began to treat her differently. Some classmates left sticky notes on her locker. You were so brave, or your story made me cry. Others just nodded at her respectfully in the hallway, but not everyone was supportive. One afternoon, as she walked to her locker, a boy named Trent, tall, loud, and known for saying whatever came to mind, muttered, Bet she just did all that for attention. Probably wasn't even real. Emma froze. Her heart hammered. Old fear surged, that familiar instinct to disappear. to go mute, to vanish. But something inside her pushed back. She turned to him and said, calm and clear, "You weren't there. You don't know anything about it." He blinked. A few students nearby fell silent, watching, and Trent, surprisingly, just looked away. She had used her voice again. Meanwhile, Mr. Carter was called into the principal's office the following week. Not because he was in trouble, but because people were finally listening. News of Emma's performance had reached the school board. Word spread that a quiet girl's silent story had helped spark a child protection investigation and a renewed focus on trauma-informed education. The principal, Mrs. Bennett, leaned back in her chair. "I want you to build this project into something permanent," she said. "A yearly presentation. A creative storytelling unit about truth and silence. Whatever you call it, I want it to stay." Mr. Carter was stunned. "I was just trying to help one student," he said. "And now you might help 100 more." She replied. Emma and Mr. Carter continued to exchange notes, now openly. She even started staying after class to help organize the new unit. She sketched ideas, themes, and storyboards for next year's students. One afternoon, while sorting colored paper into bins, Emma asked, "Why did you believe me when no one else did?" Mr. Carter paused. "I've seen too many kids hide behind silence," he said. "And I've learned that when someone hides that deeply, they're not hiding nothing. They're hiding everything." Emma smiled slightly. "You were the first adult who ever looked at me like I wasn't broken." "You're not broken," he said gently. "You're rebuilding." Weeks passed. Emma's case moved through the system. She met with a therapist twice a week and slowly began to open up more about her dad, about her mom's silence, about the years she spent learning how not to cry when it hurt. One day, in therapy, she admitted something she hadn't even told Mr. Carter. "I used to practice silence," she said. "At night, I would lie in bed and try to breathe without sound. I thought if I made no noise, he wouldn't come." The therapist didn't speak, just nodded. "You were surviving," she finally said. "And now you're learning to live." Emma didn't cry. Not that day, but when she got home, and Rufus jumped into her lap and licked her face, she let herself cry quietly into his fur. And this time, the tears weren't fear. They were released. One morning, Emma woke up early and opened her window. Birds chirped. Sunlight crept across the floor. She took out her notebook, the same one she had used with Mr. Carter, and began to write. Not a drawing, not a shadow, not a symbol, a story, her story. In words, she titled it, "The Girl Who Pretended to Be Mute." Spring arrived quietly. The trees on campus turned green again, and daffodils sprouted near the fences. It was the season of endings and beginnings, of final projects, exams, and goodbyes. Emma had been living with her foster family for nearly 3 months. Her once muted world had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. But change, even good change, is complicated. Some days she still felt a tightness in her chest, a fear that everything could be taken away again, that someone would appear and say, "Just kidding, none of this was real." Her therapist said it was normal, that healing was not a straight line, but a winding road. And Emma, for the first time, believed that maybe the road led somewhere beautiful. One day, as Mr. Carter wheeled a whiteboard into his classroom, Emma waited behind to speak with him. "I finished it," she said, holding out a thick folder. He took it. "Your story?" She nodded. Typed, titled, edited. It had a beginning, middle, and end. It told everything, not just the darkness, but the light. The moments she'd drawn breath in silence, and the moments she had dared to speak. "I want people to read it," she said. "Not for me, for other kids. The ones still pretending." Mr. Carter smiled. "We'll make copies. The library can have one. maybe even the school board. Emma hesitated, then added, I want to read part of it, out loud, at the final assembly. Mr. Carter blinked. Are you sure? No, she said honestly, but I want to try. The end-of-year assembly filled the gymnasium, folding chairs, nervous parents, sweaty palms, and proud teachers. Emma stood backstage, heart pounding like a drum. The principal welcomed everyone. Awards were handed out. Applause echoed. Laughter stirred Dot. Then Mrs. Bennett stepped to the mic. This year, something extraordinary happened in this school. A student shared a story, not with words at first, but with shadows. She reminded us that silence doesn't always mean peace. And that courage isn't loud. It's true. She turned. Emma, the stage is yours. Emma's legs shook as she walked up the steps. The microphone loomed. The crowd blurred. Dot. She could see the silhouettes of faces. Students, teachers, foster parents, the CPS worker who helped her, and Miriam from the audience, hands clasped tight. Then she spoke. My name is Emma. She began. Her voice was small, but it didn't waver. For a long time, I didn't speak. Not because I couldn't, but because it wasn't safe. People thought I was shy, or weird, or broken. But I was just surviving. The gym was silent. I used to pretend I was mute so that the world wouldn't hear what was happening at home. But a teacher noticed, and he didn't ask me to talk. He just listened, with patience, with kindness. She paused, breath catching. That saved me. And now, I want to say this to anyone else who's pretending. You don't have to live in silence. Your story matters. You matter. The audience remained frozen for a moment. Then the applause came. Not a polite clap. A standing ovation. Emma stood there, stunned, tears brimming, and smiling. Not because she had been brave, but because she had finally been heard. Later that week, Emma visited her old house for the first time, escorted by CPS and a court-appointed guardian. The house was empty now, its walls stripped, its windows dusty. She walked into her old room. The closet door where she used to hide was still, slightly crooked. The carpet still stained where her father had spilled a bottle years ago. But it didn't scare her anymore. She walked through it like it was a museum of someone else's life. She picked up an old stuffed rabbit from under the bed, missing one eye, ears frayed, and held it. Then she left it there, gently placing it on the pillow. She didn't need to carry those pieces anymore. In June, Emma received word that the courts had granted temporary custody extension to Miriam. Her father would serve time. Her mother, in ongoing treatment, had written Emma a letter apologizing, but wasn't allowed to contact her yet. Emma didn't know if she would ever want to see her again, and that was okay. Some wounds don't heal with reunion. Some heal with distance. Over the summer, Emma began volunteering at a local library. She organized children's books, helped little ones pick out stories, and even led story time once a week. On the last Saturday of July, a small boy, no more than 6, came in with wide eyes and trembling hands. He didn't speak, just pointed. Emma knelt down and smiled gently. Are you looking for a story without too many words? He nodded. She handed him the quiet book. Then she whispered, You don't have to talk if you're not ready. His eyes widened. Then he grinned, and Emma understood something profound in that moment. Her silence had once been her prison. Now her voice could be someone else's key. 1 year later, Emma stood beside Mr. Carter on the school's stage. This time, as his assistant for the new storytelling unit, a new group of students sat before them. He introduced the project with the same words. Everyone has a story. Some are loud, some are quiet, some are drawn in shadows. But all of them matter. Then he looked at Emma and said, Would you like to begin? Emma stepped forward, smiled, and began to speak.